Born in 1954 in Tokmok, Kyrgyzstan, Hamid Ismailov is an Uzbek journalist and writer who was forced to leave Uzbekistan in 1992 due to what the state dubbed unacceptable democratic tendencies. He came to the United Kingdom where he took a job with the BBC World Service, where he worked for 25 years. In addition to journalism, Ismailov is a prolific writer of poetry and prose, and his books have been published in Uzbek, Russian, French, German, Turkish, English, and other languages. His work is still banned in Uzbekistan. He is the author of many novels, including The Railway, Hostage to Celestial Turks, Googling for Soul, The Underground, A Poet and Bin-Laden, Manaschi, The Devil's Dance. He is a translator too. He has translated Russian and Western classics into Uzbek and Persian classics into Russian and several Western languages. In this conversation, he spoke about the process of writing, translations, about the culture of Central Asia, and his recent novel Manaschi. In Manaschi, the writer interrogates the intersection between the tradition and modernity. The story starts with a former radio presenter interpreting one of his dreams and thinks that he has been initiated into the world of spirits as a Manaschi, one of the Kyrgyz bards and healers reciting Manas, the longest human epic, consisting nearly of 1,000,000 verses. Manaschis are revered as people who are connected with supernatural forces. Traveling to a mountainous village populated by Tajiks and Kyrgyz, he instead witnesses the full scale of the epic's wrath on his life. Dr. Hamid, welcome to our podcast, Harshniyam.
Thank you for having me.
It's really an honor to have you with us today. You lived in various countries. You lived in Uzbekistan and I believe somewhere near Tashkent. And you lived in Moscow for some time and you are living in Europe right now. All these living experiences in different countries, right? How it has enriched your storytelling and thematic choices.
Thank you for inviting me. So, yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, it started with my childhood. In my childhood, I lived quite a nomadic life because of my parents. So, I lived in Kyrgyzstan, in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan, partly in Tajikistan. So, I lived in the whole Central Asia. Being sort of, experiencing the different cultures of Central Asia, different languages of Central Asia. And that, in a way, enriched me from the very childhood, I think. And as you are saying, in my adult life, I continued this nomadic style of life, though I never dreamt myself or forced myself to move from places to places, but somehow my destiny moved me throughout the world, So, uh, not wishing, I found myself kicked out of my country. Then, for 3 months, I came to France to sort of escape the storm, as they say. But these 3 months lasted now 30 years, and over these 30 years, I was living in France, in Germany, in Italy, in United Kingdom, in Czech Republic, so in many places. Obviously, any person who is facing different cultures is affected by these cultures because you develop your new sort of affiliations, new links, and so on and so forth. So In that sense, obviously, I was enriching my experience as a writer and storyteller because different countries are telling stories differently. For example, in the former Soviet Union, what was very important, the very important thing was the concept of the thing, the theory of the thing. So everything was about though they professed materialism, but everything was about the ideology. So, in that sense, everything should have been explained through the ideas. Whereas, for example, in England or in United Kingdom, it's very much about your own experiences and your practices. It's more about the pragmatism, and skepticism. So it's completely different outlook at the world and therefore different storytelling techniques as well. So in that sense, yes, I was blessed to witness different storytelling techniques and I have tried to use them in my work.
You lived away from your native land, that is Uzbekistan, in exile for most of your life. How it influenced your writing?
So, as I am saying, different cultures are enriching me with different storytelling techniques. There are a different type of writers. For example, there are writers who are writing about their ethnic side, let's say, in different language. The famous books, for example, written by Afghani, Turkish, Arab writers in English, which is absolutely fine, or Indian writers for the same sake, yeah, written in English. So they are bringing to the feast their own culture in different language. My take is a bit different. My take is, because I was experiencing different cultures and different languages, my take is that language comes with culture, and if I am writing in English, so I'm writing not about, let's say, Central Asian realities, but about the same Central Asians in England, for example. For example, one of my novels, Gaia or Queen of the Ants, is about a lady who ended up her life, Central Asian lady, one of the first ladies of Central Asia, who ended her life and old age in England, for example, in Eastbourne. Or I wrote a novel in English which is called Amber or Good Morning Midnight, which is about an Indian lady living her life in Britain, for example, and these kind of things which are come together with the language rather than, different culture coming with different language.
You have written your novels in Russian, Uzbek, and English too. So, how do you perceive the impact of language when you convey emotions and certain cultural nuances?
In fact, I've sort of answered in my previous got the answer as well, but that is the an interesting dilemma for myself. Why I'm writing a particular story, for example, in Uzbek, why I'm writing in Russian, why I'm writing in English or in French. So I was always puzzled with it. So initially, I had a theory that, for example, because my family life was in Uzbek, so maybe I'm writing about my childhood in Uzbek. But it turned out that the railway, my first novel, which is about my childhood in a way and traditional life, was written in Russian rather than in Uzbek. So I was quite puzzled by that one. Then I thought maybe professional life, which was in Russian, is written in Russian. No, once again, I found that some of my novels about my professional, my adult life are written in Uzbek. So it was quite confusing, but ultimately, uh, it comes to the conversation. Who are you conversing with? Who is your writer, correspondent, listener? What's your message about? Because some messages they work in certain languages, some messages they don't work in certain languages too. So therefore, I think that it's a package. Culture comes with language, and novel comes with a certain language from the very beginning. I can't imagine that, for example, a novel which I have written in Russian, I could have repeated in Uzbek. It's completely different sort of set of tools, set of colors, set of musicality, set of everything. So I think my answer is that certain languages or certain novels of mine come with certain languages from the very beginning.
Your background in journalism, how it influenced your fiction writing? Because I mean to ask you, how do you balance this objective reporting style of a journalist? Uh, and again, you have to act as a creative storyteller too. How do you balance these two?
In a way, I became a journalist quite late at my 40s, and sometimes I wish that I should have become journalist maybe earlier, which would have saved me from, excessive usage of palette, excessive usage of language, lots of digressions in my initial novels. But on the other hand, that is the strength of those novels as well. In a way, they are kind of Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy. Excessive in language, in beauties, in sort of embellishment. So maybe that was the certain period of my creativity. But what journalism gave me is, generally English language. What English gave me, economy, and accuracy, because the longest form in radio journalism, for example, for us was a package which should last, let's say, 3-5 minutes only. If you are saying a dispatch or telling the dispatch, so you have to squeeze in all your thoughts in 1 minute. Sometimes you are asked to squeeze everything into one sort of quote. So basically, you're squeezing all your knowledge into couple of sentences. So in that sense, this Hemingwayan school taught me to be very, very accurate and economical in language. And I find that my English novels, as opposed to Russian or Uzbek novels, they are much more short breath novels. So I'm not digressing too much. I'm straight to the point in a way.
When it comes to the process of writing, creative process of writing, mm, some writers they say that they have a very clear plan before they start writing. And some people say that they will discover the story as they go along. What is your approach? How do you balance the structure and spontaneity while you write?
I have to go to my myself's history in a way. Yeah, when I was young and I used to write lots of poetry, my writing season would come in the spring. With the nature, waking up, and so on and so forth. So now, as Pushkin said once famously, my old age makes me lean towards the prose. So, in that sense, my writing season starts with the clock change, the autumn for clock change and lasts through the winter to the spring, so when the long evening hours, the dark evening hours, give me a chance to concentrate in writing, in during the long nights. So in that sense, summertime in a way is a preparatory time for me when I am thinking about the next novel or project or whatever it is. Yes, and in that sense, yes, I am preparing a kind of a kind of project of this novel in my head. I'm very meticulous in that one. I write sort of notes. I make lots of schemes, so everything touches everything. So everything is working in a way. There is nothing spare in the novel, and so on and so forth. And then I start to write, but writing once again is like a snowball. You start to write. For example, once I started to write one novel which I made in my mind, yeah, but writing 50 pages, all of a sudden I realized that the tonality is repeating my previous novel, which wasn't my plan, and therefore I tore apart these 100 or 50 pages, and started everything anew, afresh. So when the tonality was completely different and tonality was exactly what I wanted, so it's like a snowball, you've got something, a core of the thing within your head, but then you allow the characters to act, the sort of plot to act, but at the same time, you keep control of the things as well. So, as I said, there are no spare things. At the very end, when I finish the first draft of the novel, I print and then print in long lists, and hang the novel on my wall to see the novel in wholeness. And then I start to, like a sort of, an artist, to see where it's thick, where it's thin, where I should add something, kind of compositionally, amending it. And then finally, so after that one, I start to read it on the application, which turns it into the text once again. So it's another editing exercise for the musicality of the thing, because when you are reading it, you notice the musical falsehood, for example, the mm, all kind of musical sort of mistakes or whatever. So that is the process. It is a long process. So ultimately, the product should be good in terms of composition. Everything should work. Plot should work. Characters should be logical and developed and sort of alive. Yeah, not the death born. So everything should be in place. So, and the musicality and the tonality of the thing should be there too. Robert Chandler, one of the best translators of the Russian literature into English, because what he does, he reads his translations to his wife, and the wife is listening as a listener and the editor for the orality, for the musicality, for the logic, as a listener. The problem with listening versus reading is that listening is much, much older skill which the humankind developed. All our history, we were listening to the things rather than reading. Reading is the sort of, invention of the recent times in a way. In that sense, uh, now, for example, for 10 or 12 last years, I'm listening to the books. I am not reading the books. I'm listening to the books, and I'm enriching myself much, much, more than I used to read books, because you immediately catch the the false emotions, false logic, for example, lots of things. I'll give you an example. For example, listening to the death of Ivan Ilyich of Leo Tolstoy, I found 6 or 7 stylistic mistakes. And I was thinking to myself that Sofia Andreevna, his wife, didn't listen very carefully at these moments. Yes, I'm very critical when I'm listening, because it's an older skill, which we possess. In that sense, it's very good to read your novel into the computer if you don't have your wife, for example, who is listening and who is editing.
Now, you spoke about Robert Chandler, and you have been very active as a translator too. So, how do you think the translation helped you as a writer?
First of all, it is an academy, because you are translating usually the best of the literature, existing literature. So I used to translate the classics of Uzbek literature, of Persian literature. It's the top notch literature. So you are learning the skills, you are learning the trade. As one of the Uzbek writers who used to translate, one of the best Uzbek writers, Shukurhol Mirzaev, who used to translate Russian classics into Uzbeks, he said that he is like an engineer, as a mechanic, has been under the all kind of cars, Mercedes, yeah, Audi, Toyota, and he learned everything, like a mechanic, but by translating Dostoevsky, Chekhov, Tolstoy, and so on and so forth. So the same has happened to me. I used to translate the best of the Western literature into my language as well, into Uzbek. I used to translate Lorca, Verlaine, poetry, prose of the best writers. So it's an academy, but it's a ruthless academy, because the more you translate, the more you understand that languages are completely different set of tools, which are meant for different cultures. And as a translator, I gave up because of that. When you are becoming too good translator, you understand the restrictions of every language.
And one of your other interviews, I heard you saying how the way people live affects the construction of the language. Right? You are talking about, I believe, Uzbek.
Yes, it's a nomadic, because you are on the horse. You can't, you know, be spared by long sentences. You have to be very economical, because the person next to you or on the other side of the battlefield should be instructed exactly by a very sharp and brisk command, let's say. And the language has developed in a certain manner. First of all, the roots of the words are very short one. Every syllable is a word, not just one word, but several words. For example, all, 2 letters, O and L. So it means red. It means take. It means different things. 4 things basically. All the same. For example, with ot, it's a horse. It's a name, and so on and so forth. So by context, you should understand. Distinguish those words, and then you are adding the suffixes which are enriching this word. For example, ish is work. İşçi is worker. İşçiler is workers. İşçilerning is those which workers which belong to workers. İşçilerimizning those things which belong to our workers. So you continue like that. For example, and you are shouting, for example, "Olabutamas," which means in different language, you should use force for up to 7 words, for example. You know, a short command is immediately is understood by another person on the horse. By the way, it's a long sort of story, you know. For example, the equality of genders is dictated once again by this feature, for example, you know. Women on the horse are equal to men, you know. In that sense, we don't have in our languages, for example, the genders. Another thing is in our languages, there are substantive two sort of, you know, two personas, for example, the first person and the second person. The third person, which is beyond our sort of, you know, communication, yeah, is equal to the thing. So he becomes a part of the world of things rather than a human being. The human being is that who is in communication with you. Once again, you know, if you are on the horse and you are seeing someone next to you, so that is the person. If you lost it, him, he becomes part of the sort of unnamed things.
Okay. And most of your books, they have been translated into English, and not by one, translator. You work with many translators. You work with Donald Rayfield, for example, for this book, and even the first book, The Devil's Dance, the other novel. And of Strangers and Beasts, it was translated by Shelley Fairweather Vega, I believe. Right? So, when it comes to working with translators, how do you involve with them? Is it an active collaboration, or you let them go, or how is it?
Uh, because I myself translated quite a lot of literature, I know how difficult it is to adopt someone's child, you know, and make it's a member of your family, or, for example, to plant, to plant a certain tree from other places and make it grow up in your garden. In that sense, I am quite liberal with my translators. Generally, uh, you know, I was blessed with my translators because they are the best in the field, basically. And therefore, I'm trusting them 100%. But when I'm needed, I'm always there to help with, with certain tricks and so on and so forth, especially with pans or languages or sentences. So whenever I'm needed, I'm there, but I'm not enforcing anything upon them. So they are free to do their job. I trust them.
Have you ever encountered any surprising or particularly effective translations of your work?
The other way around, maybe sometimes. But it wasn't because of the translators, it was because of the publisher. So, in one country, my book, The Railway, should have been translated, and the best translators were hired to translate it. And I was spoiled by Robert Chandler, who sent me 2,000 emails, you know, while translating The Railway. I haven't received a single note from those best translators into another language, but I was sure that they will do their best. And on Amazon, the book appeared in full, sort of, 400 or so pages. But when I received the book, all of a sudden I realized that it's a half of the book. So basically, against the whole philosophy of the book, the publisher decided to make it one nation book. It was about the melting pot of nations, the book. But the publisher decided to pick up just the so-called Uzbek chapters of that one. So that was quite a shocking experience. The book failed as such, and I'm blaming the publisher for that one because it was completely against the philosophy of the book.
The novel that we are talking about, Manaschi, it is about identity, cultural identity, mm, certain part of it at least. Now, after the division of USSR, Uzbekistan and all was part of USSR earlier. Now, after the division of USSR, what is the effect it had on one's own national identity, and how these different countries are coping up with it?
So one should tell that this independence was granted, not earned or conquered. So basically, it fell upon the Central Asian countries because the Slavonic countries they decided to get out of the Soviet Union and disbanded it. Yeah. So basically, Central Asian countries they've been granted this independence. In a way, they turned into the kind of fiefdoms, the autocratic ones. All of them, they turned into autocratic fiefdoms rather than a modern developing states. So that is the political side of it. As for the cultural side, it's strange. On the one hand, yes, independence is a blessing, but at the same time, I start to notice that, because there is no resistance to any other culture, yeah, so the culture becomes sort of without any shows in a way, without self identification. During the Soviet time, the culture of, let's say, of Uzbeks, of Kyrgyz, was so sort of, Uzbekized and Kyrgyzized or Kazakized against the Russian rule, against the Russian, sort of resisting the Russian influences. It was more authentic because it was against something. Now there is no this factor being against something, and therefore culture is all over the place. It goes the right side, it goes the left side. So identity, in a way, is has been lost basically. In a way. So as for the writing, for example, once again, every kind of writing is entering now, all kind of schools are existing, but when you compare to the sort of level of writing in Uzbek or in Kazakh or in Kyrgyz, so those the so-called Soviet Kyrgyz writers like Chingiz Aytmatov, or Kazakh Soviet writers like Mukhtar Auezov, or Uzbek Soviet writers like Cholpon or Gafur Gulam, they are still way ahead, in their stylistic and their skills of using language in every department of the literature, basically.
Now, the Manaschi, the novel, it showcases the art of oral storytelling. In India, too, we have a long tradition of oral storytelling. Our epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana, even our ancient sacred texts, Vedas, are passed on across generations through this method. Could you please describe the oral storytelling culture in Central Asia?
Central Asia is generally is divided between historically nomadic people and settled people. It's a cross road of the Silk Road, of the civilizations. It's the place where the kind of Indian, Chinese, Asian culture meets the Persian culture, European culture, and so on and so forth. It's a place of mixture of everything. In that sense, uh, in both facets of this culture, in nomadic and in sedentary culture, there were great examples of storytelling, of oral storytelling. If you take, for example, the sedentary culture, many people they forget that the famous 1001 Night was told in in India to the Shah of Samarkand. So basically, it's rooted in Central Asia, with the so-called Moguls in a way. Uh, that is one tradition. The second tradition is the nomadic tradition. And Manas, for example, as an epic, is the biggest epic of the world. It's 48 or 50 times longer than Iliad and Odyssey of Homer, etc., etc. It's the longest human created epic, which consists of 2 million verses. So you can imagine, in that sense, obviously, being a Central Asian, I have some debts to my ancestors in a way to continue these traditions, both sedentary and nomadic one. So, because from the very childhood I was exposed to these traditions, it's in my blood and it's in my sort of skin in a way. And therefore, in my novels, for example, I try to develop it further, to modernize it, to make it appealing to the modern readers and listeners. So, in that sense, I'm using all these techniques in my writing.
So now the Manas, the epic, is it part of traditional Islam?
They've Islamized it, pre-Islamic. In fact, it's pre-Islamic. But as with any epics which lasts over the centuries, they Islamized it because Manas all of a sudden turned into a kind of prophet and missionary who turned different people into Islam, conquered them, and started to turn into Islam. But generally speaking, it's a kind of museum of nomadic culture, or oral museum of nomadic culture in all its richness. So it's about the traditions, it's about the rituals, it's about everything in your life, with some prescriptions, what to do in a certain situation. Basically, it's a compendium of the knowledge of nomadic people of Central Asia. It happens not just with Islam, with any world religion. For example, if you take Christianity, so certain people they've adopted this Christianity for their own needs. For example, English people in Anglicanism, let's say, the Germans in Protestantism, and so on and so forth. So the same is with Islam. For example, Sufism of Central Asia is the adaptation of Islam to the local culture. The same happens with, for example, Chishtiya in India. The local sort of singing, dancing is becoming part of Islam. Or the experience of Akbar Shah or Dara Shukur, bringing the local culture into kind of Islam, yeah, enriching it with local color and with local traditions, rituals. So it's always the way to adapt the world religion to the local needs.
Now, when it comes to the novel, specific details of the novel, there are a lot of episodes with the tumor, the eagle, right? where Beckel and Dapan uh, they spend a lot of time with humor. These episodes are very detailed. The normally we see human to writing about human to human interaction in a detailed way. It can be imagined, but the kind of interactions that you depicted between the bird and the man, unless you experience it, I felt writing it in such a detailed and lovely manner would have been very difficult. Have you met eagle hunters? Have you spent time?
It's my childhood. It's the experience of my childhood. I was brought up by my great grandfather on the horse. I do remember that he was tying me up to his gown. To his back, on the horse, and then we would go to the hunters, to the so-called shaitan koprik, which is the devil's bridge. We would cross between the between the mountains. Very fable bridge, which used to be called the Devil's Bridge. So all these experiences are in my mind, in my memory. Yes, the relationship of those people with eagles, with their horses as well. Unfortunately, we are losing this tradition. Unfortunately, less and less people are sort of, relating to. It's becoming an exoticism rather than the mode of life.
To take the story forward, the way it is constructed, the novel, it's a multi-strand narration. There is a story running in the present, and there is Manas rendition, and there are Baisal's tapes, and again other character talking about Baisal's life, his wife, etc. And again Sattar's parables. So every one of these, in their own way, they take the story forward. So this multi-strand narration, is it a conscious choice to tell the story in this way, or did it evolve as you went along?
Generally, though, I am saying that everything is done during the summertime, everything is prepared, but generally speaking, writing is unconscious process. Then you start to rationalize after you've written, you start to understand what you've written in a way. But you are developing your thoughts, which are in your mind, in your unconsciousness, but there is some impulse which is the primary for this particular novel. For me, for example, if I try to go to the core of this novel, it's about it's about the false prophethood. I think so, because that was the initial, the primary impulse. What happens to a person who is not sure, is he a prophet or not prophet? Because our life around is full of this kind of false, promises, false roles. When journalists are becoming politicians and presidents or prime ministers, and so on and so forth. Lots of things are based on these false prophethoods. And that was the primary, I think. And what you confront it with different sort of with different sides, with different point of views, with different narratives in a way, because you have to see this particular person from different sides, in different situations, in different sort of facets. Maybe that was the leading idea which made me sort of give voices to different people. But generally speaking, uh, I am a kind of supporter or writer of the novels with lots of voices. For example, the railway, the number of characters, even I don't remember all the names of the characters in it. And everyone has got his or her own story. So, to give the voice to those people who don't have their voice is one of the missions, I think, of a writer in Central Asia, because they are so autocratic, they are so mono-voiced societies that you have to give the voice to different people. Therefore, I've created even the circle of writers consisting of many, many sort of, uh, pseudonyms or heteronyms or what heteronyms, the circle of writers giving power to different people rather than to myself, not becoming the sort of, the shadow of this autocracy in my world of writing.
Wonderfully put. Now, Checkbell, the village where most of the action happens, it's an interesting place. It is separated by a stream, and on one side there is Tajikistan, and the other side you have Kyrgyzstan. And in Tajikistan, you have a Kyrgyz settlement, and in Kyrgyzstan, you have a Tajik settlement. And Bekesh himself is of the mixed descent. His father is Kyrgyz and his mother is Tajik. This blurred identity, fluid identity, and again you have one more character, mm, is Ulanku, I believe, is a Mongolian who wants to be Kyrgyz, right? So,
Yeah.
what exactly you are trying to convey?
You know, one of the best writers of Russia of last, I don't know, 50 years, Andrei Bitov once famously said, what I am inventing, everyone considers to be absolute true. What I am writing from the reality, everyone thinks that I'm inventing, So basically, Czech Bill is existing place in a way. There are places like that in Central Asia. There are people like Bekesh in Central Asia. So it's not so much an invention. But the identity is an interesting thing. I'll refer to my DNA analysis. In my fifth sort of generation cousins, there is every nation of the world. I am saying it sort of loudly, every nation of the world. You name, and I'll find the name with the personality, my fifth or sixth cousin. So after that one, including Indian, Bangladeshis, Chinese, Koreans, Jews, Arabs, Poles, Czechs, Spanish, Greeks, you name it, Turks, you name it. So after that one, what kind of pure nations we can talk? So, make DNA analysis and everyone will find everything in their blood. So we know that it's a social construct, belonging. It's exactly the same thing which, for example, in the railway, Obid Qore wants to become an Uzbek. All his life he wants to become an Uzbek, and he by Stalinian police KGB he killed as an Uzbek being a Kyrgyz. So he reached his dream with the price of his death, basically. Should should have he done that? Should have he not done it? So that is the question. So all of us they want on the one hand, to belong to a certain nation, to certain religion, to certain family, to certain descendancy, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, there is a strong conviction in every person to become something else as well. You know, in England, I'm dying to understand what the British person or what the English person is thinking or doing or whatever. I want to become one of them. In Czech Republic, I want to become. I study Czech language. I want to become, for a minute, them as well. There is this human interest always, to belong, at the same time to break the belonging, to break free from belonging. Remember the Queen's song, to break free. So there is always this struggle within the person, which is a nice struggle, a nice struggle, which brings people together. That's why you are talking to me to understand something from my experiences. Therefore, I'm talking to you to understand some experiences of your culture, of your life. That brings us together. So therefore, maybe that is about that one.
And certain sentences in the novel, I found them very, very profound. For example, when you are talking about Manaschi, you said he can see the future, he can get into the past, he can conjure fantastic things and situations and see the unknown. Uh, are you talking about the writer? Is writer is also like a Manaschi, a creative writer?
I think so. I think so. I think so. Basically, therefore, if I think about my novels, so basically, I'm talking always about storytellers. These are the stories of storytellers, in a way. Uh, when I'm saying storytellers, they might be the professional storytellers like Manaschi, but they might be unknown storytellers, storytellers, they don't know that they are storytellers. One of the main function of the humankind in this world is storytelling. Even the hereafter prepares us to tell our story of this life. So basically, you are going to the exam, to the God, with your story, what you've done, what you've seen, what you've heard. So basically, as they say in different religions, we'll be given the book of our deeds, in one hand, and we'll be telling our story in hereafter too. So basically, in that sense, we are sent to this world as storytellers, basically, to bring our stories back to the Creator. So, therefore, storytelling is one of the main functions of humankind.
Your novels mostly, they have a mystical aspect too in the novel when you write, especially this novel. Have you had any kind of such mystic experiences? The reason I asked you this question, you talked about a fox coming into the garden as you are writing the other novel, and it disappears as soon as you complete your novel.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, my wife could confirm it too because she was witnessing the same. And there are plenty of things which, when you are attentive to the details, you start to notice. I had several instances, unbelievable in terms of logic, in terms of rational thinking, but which happened. So I've got this kind of stories which I used in my uh, novels. So I was in the military school. I was young in military school, and we were working in the woods, sort of in the woods during the summertime. But at the same time, I used to, help my commander to write his essays because my commander was studying at the university. And he received an excellent mark for one of the essays which I wrote for him. And therefore, he was so happy. He said, "What do you want? You can go to your sort of vacation 2 weeks earlier." I said, "Yeah, it's all right. I'll go." So I went to the vacation and I came to Tashkent. In Tashkent, I was planning to go to my relatives to Bishkek, to Kyrgyzstan. But in the museum, I saw a picture of Karahan, which reminded me the village of my grandmother. There was a tree with one last leaf on it, yeah, the autumn tree. And I immediately felt so strong the sort of feeling of this village where my grandmother lives. So I decided to go there. Overnight, I went there. In the morning, I reached this mountainous village and came to my grandmother's house, which was closed. I came over the fence, and sat at the grandmother's house, uh, ate fruits, and so on and so forth. My grandmother wasn't there. And I thought that maybe my father, who was divorced from my mother because my mother died, he married another woman. So, and therefore, I didn't want to go to my father's house, but stayed with my grandmother. I thought that my grandmother is at some kind of party or wedding at my father's, and reluctantly, I decided to go to my father's house to get my grandmother and come back to her house. And at the turn of the street, I noticed a crowd in front of my father's house, and I thought, yes, I was right. There is a wedding party or something like that there, so lots of people, and my grandmother should be there. And I entered, and at that time, everyone says Allahu Akbar and took the dead body of my basically of my grandmother, and I joined the procession to the cemetery, and put her into the soil. And then all my relatives said that her wish was, I won't die, I won't go into the tomb before my grandson comes here. And it took me from Kaliningrad, which is the other end of the Soviet Union, to the mountainous village, to the funeral of my grandmother. How do you explain it? How do you explain? 2 weeks before, so commander allowed me. I went to Tashkent. I was planning to go different side, but went to the museum. I saw this picture. So everything was sort of guiding me towards my grandmother's funeral. And that was her wish. That was her wish. And she was a very strong and sort of very pious character. I described her in my novel, The Railway. So, if people are interested in her spiritual powers, they can read about that.
What is the next novel of yours, which is going to get published?
So next year, hopefully, 'cause Yale University Press is publishing my novel, which is called, I don't know how it will be called in English, but it's about the artificial intelligence versus Hafiz. It's an interesting novel, very interesting novel. Was written before the hype about the artificial intelligence. But in a
You
way,
mean to say that's a translation?
yes, translation, yes. And the German publishing house, Maton Zayens, will publish my hyper novel, Russian Matryoshka, Russian Doll, which consists of 6 novels in one. You know these Russian dolls which are inside of each other. So this kind of composition of 6 novels.
The novel Manaschi, it touches on various themes of cultural identity, heritage, um, and preserving some traditional art forms in the modern world. As a writer, what would you like your readers to contemplate after reading your novel?
With Manaschi, I would like to my reader to contemplate about these false prophethoods, because there are too many of them in a modern world. All these populism, for example, is growing up on these false prophethoods. All these the propaganda is about false prophethood. All these fake news are about the false prophethoods. It's one of the biggest issues of the modern world. So maybe one of the things which they can look at this novel is this particular idea, the danger of this particular idea.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid, for your time. It has been wonderful listening to you talking about your life and your creative process of writing, and of course, Manassi. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your interest.